for this morning? Very good. Okay. Well, thank you for that. And the first thing we need to do is to approve the agenda for today.
So moved. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Then the agenda is approved. And next, we need to do the approval of the minutes from September the 18th.
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Then our minutes are approved. And now it's time for our public comment period. Has anyone signed up for that? Thank you. Okay. And just as a brief reminder, when we have a public comment, the time limit for any individual or representative addressing the board shall be 3 minutes unless a majority of the board agrees to additional time. A group which is represented by at least 4 people in the audience may elect 1 representative to speak for 10 minutes of time and can be awarded that representative if at least 4 people in the audience relinquish any rights to speak on the issue. Doesn't look like we'll have that problem today. Each speaker during the public comment period shall be limited to one appearance at each regular meeting of the board. The board is not expected to comment on matters brought to the board during public comment. Any individual speaking during public comment shall only address the entire board, and any polling of the board is inappropriate for public comment. Persons addressing the board are expected to observe the decorum of the chamber, to be respectful of the board and the public, to refrain from the use of profanity or foul language, and to refrain from making disclosures prohibited by the Personnel Act with respect to any county employee. The chairperson may rule out of order any comments made during this part of the agenda that are rude, inappropriate, or intended to harass any person or group of people, or that are not addressed to the entire board, and it's authorized to take reasonable and appropriate measures to ensure compliance with these rules unless a majority of the board agrees to overrule the chair's determination. So I don't think we'll have those issues this morning. And Dee Dee Stiles is our first person to speak.
Even if it's not on, I'm sure you can hear. As my dad used to say, I'll use my courtroom. One of the, hopefully, in the near future, the planning department will present to the planning board for discussion some new rules for steep slope development. That's what I'm hoping. And when you have an opportunity to study those rules, I would like to remind you that any subdivision on a steep slope has neighbors down at the bottom of the slope. For years, I've been coming to the planning board, and in the past, the subdivisions used to come to the planning board for approval or for a recommendation that the county commissioners approve them. And often there would be people who lived below where the subdivision was, who would come and have issues about what was going to happen when the subdivision was built and what was going to happen to the traffic and what was going to happen to particularly the flow of water, whether it was going to wash down on their property, whether the mountains were not going to be able to absorb enough water. And when the dry time come, like now, the creeks would go too low and they couldn't water their fields, or they couldn't or their springs would go dry. All of those things happen to the people who live at the bottom of the slope. So when you have an opportunity to review any new plans that come before you for steep slope development, please make sure that there's something in there that addresses the consequences to the people that live downhill from the new developments. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your being here. And now we have Tracy Swartout.
Tracy, is there any comment regarding the rezoning case? We need to wait for the public hearing. Okay.
Okay, thank you. All right, very good. Then we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a vote on the planning board rules of procedure. And Mr. Euler?
I believe.
Use your courtroom voice.
Yeah, so it's recording. I believe that a copy of the rules of procedure were sent out to everybody. And to my knowledge, there have been no changes based on all the comments that we had at our last meeting. So I believe that the version that you have is ready to go. You voted on.
Any questions? Or-
Just make a motion
Very good.
to approve the rules as proposed and as were sent to us by Terry a couple of weeks ago.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Then I think that passes. And the next thing we have is the chair and vice chair election. And I'm not sure how that gets conducted.
I would nominate Terry for chair of the board. Unless we want to do some other kind of process.
Terry?
Oh, I'm wrong meeting. Nancy. You really deserve a promotion and not a demotion. So yes, sorry.
There you go.
That was
No, pays nothing. And sorry, Nancy.
Well, I greatly appreciate that. And I am honored to do it again and happy to do it again if that's what everybody wants. But I also would like for someone else to be able to do it if they want to do it as well. Okay. Well, thank you.
You do a great job,
You do.
Well, I
Yes.
appreciate that very much.
No change needed.
Nancy. Second that.
Then I guess all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Well, again, I'm honored and thank you very much, but it's an easy job to do with a great board, so thank you. Okay, then we have a vice chair to elect. And there is no sitting vice chair, so somebody has to do it.
Not sure if he's interested, but Ken, I would nominate you. I would wait to see whether, if everybody wants that, I'm fine with it. I'm a little concerned about my own schedule. Right. I'm running for another office. I would almost rather have somebody who had a little more content background. I was gonna nominate John, but I think John might be too busy too. But I'm happy to serve if people feel that's a good idea. I thought it was a good idea.
I heard that as a motion, so
Okay, I'll change it to a motion.
I'll second that. And
Yeah.
Ken, if we get to a point where it is difficult, I'm sure
Yeah.
we can find somebody.
Then there is no further discussion. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Then congratulations. Okay, then we can move on to the other items of business we have, which are two public hearings. And the first one is ZPH 2023-00027 with Biltmore Farms LLC has applied to rezone two parcels of land identified as tax lot pins 9635-54-4215 and 9635-37-0439, which is 176 East Frederick Law Olmsted Way and an unaddressed parcel on Brevard Road, which are zoned R3 residential, RLD residential, NS for neighborhood service, and CS commercial service and they would like that rezoned to EMP employment with the portion of PN 9635-544215 that is currently zoned RLD remaining RLD. And so,
Give me 1 second.
sure.
Madam Chair, I'm going to need to recuse myself from this one related to an associational relationship with the applicant.
Okay. There, do we need to vote on that, or then all those in favor of John recusing, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Very good.
You should be able to grab it. Can you,
Thank you, John.
can you grab it from the green
Okay.
part?
Um,
Give us a second while we get this set up.
I gotta get onto Intel, so.
There we go.
It's on, I read on it.
Okay. Took me a while, but I think it's working. Okay, so this is ZPH 2023-00027, Biltmore Farms, Frederick Law, Olmsted Way, and it was noticed in the Citizen Times. Notices were sent to owners within 1,000 feet. The site was posted. It was noticed on the Buncombe County website, all correctly. Biltmore Farms LLC is the applicant and owner, and it's 179 East Frederick Law Olmsted Way and an unaddressed parcel on Brevard Road. It's about 770 total acres. It's undeveloped land, and it is served by public water and sewer. So you can see the current zoning is a mishmash. It's CS, R3, EMP, NS, and then RLD. What they are proposing is EMP for the majority of the property, but they are proposing, you can see the little RLD down at the bottom. They're proposing the RLD portion remain RLD. And I will note that the Blue Ridge Parkway has a buffer surrounding it, and that Blue Ridge Parkway overlay would remain in place. I only have some of the proposed, some of the current and proposed, and then the proposed district, because I could not fit them all on this slide. So these are the most intense residential and then commercial ones. So for R3 and CS, 30,000 minimum square footage for a lot with no public sewer or water. 12,000 square foot for public water and sewer for R3, 10,000 square foot for public water and sewer for CS. And then if it does have public water and sewer, it's 8,000 square feet in R3, and then 6,000 square feet in CS. The setbacks, you can see that the setbacks would actually increase in the EMP zoning district from the setbacks with water and sewer in the R3 and CS district. Density would remain the same, and then height would increase. The highest you can currently do on the property in that CS portion is 50 feet. Allowed height in EMP is 90 feet. Surrounding the property, to the north is the Biltmore Estate. To the east is the Biltmore Estate residential and commercial uses. To the south is residential, office, industrial, and institutional uses. And to the west is the French Broad River, Pisgah National Forest, and undeveloped land owned by Buncombe County, and then residential development. And that is it for mine. And I'm going to give me a second to pull up the applicant's presentation. And did you guys have any questions for me? Parkways. Give me 1 second. can't see the thing to move the slides forward now. I guess I can. Okay, go ahead.
I'll be, good morning, members of the board. The last time I appeared before you was on second. Good to see you all. First of all, thanks for all those. You're representing a little more. With me here is Ben Teague, who's the vice president of development. Before I get going, I want to say congratulations on plan on some kind of the new plan, some kind of prize within an APA meeting. So congratulations. If someone has worked through a number of those things, I know how. I want to thank Jillian and Nate for their guidance through this process and their help and the preparation of the staff analysis. I think it's very thorough.
Yes.
You can skip to the first couple because you've already covered those.
Just tell me when to stop. Keep going.
Yeah, I do want to clarify this, that we are, that the existing low density zoning along the French Broad River is remaining there. We're not after that through the zoning. And of course, as Julie mentioned, the overlay will remain in place too. Part of the next slide. As you all know, the Buncombe County Comprehensive Plan 2043 identifies this area as mixed-use area 2. That's on pages 46 to 65 of your plan. The primary land uses in the mixed-use area 2 are calls for industrial parks, large commercial business campuses, and manufacturing centers. Secondary land uses multifamily, residential, limited supported retail, and recreation. And see my crudely drawn arrow there pointing to where the property is. It's down south of it's towards the southern part of Buncombe County. That's fine. I want to. This is the general character description of mixed use area 2 out of the newly adopted plan. I want to note particularly the inclusion of medium density housing, walkability as desirable characteristics. Right? And it really does live up to its name of promoting mixed use development. So some of the design considerations, all this stuff is taken in your plan. You all are probably more familiar with than I am. Encouraging connectivity to adjacent properties, pedestrian and bicycle connectivity, flexibility around parking location, and especially, again, encouraging mixing of land uses. The way the current code is structured, there's not really a lot of ways to accomplish that. What we think with the plan having been adopted the way it is, that it goes a long way towards encouraging that. Next slide. The employment, the rezoning to employment that we're requesting, we're doing that because employment zone, better than any other zoning classification in the current ordinance, matches up with the uses that are promoted in the mixed use area 2 in your plan. And I do want to point out here that the employment zone does allow all forms of residential use in you're used to it. As far as next slide, please. A couple of things you look for when you're deciding whether to rezone to employment or the current existence of transportation services. There is current access from the Barn Road to Shake Parkway, and access from I-26 is anticipated for 2024-2025. The area already has public water, public sewer, electricity, and natural gas, so it is well suited for the type of development that zoning will allow. It's consistent with the comprehensive plan in many ways. I don't have time to go through them all, but particularly chapter 2 and chapter 5, growth, equity, conservation, and economic development, education, jobs. I want to point out that the colors on those lines correspond to the colors of your plan. But we think that this proposed rezoning lines up well with the 2043 plan. Next slide, please. Yeah, the rezoning will improve the opportunities for expanding workforce housing options. Clearly, as I've already said on a couple of occasions, a couple of times, it facilitates mixed use of cluster development, and because your site-specific approval processes such as community-oriented development and special use permits or planned unit developments allow you to cluster the uses in certain areas of the property, we think that also protect natural amenities. And of course, we're not seeking the rezoning of the area right along the river. Next slide. So I'm not going to read through all of these. They're straight out of your plan. So but we think these are the policies the things that this rezoning would accomplish in order to satisfy this policy promoting development and have communities in the identified growth areas. Next slide. It also presents the opportunity to maximize development density and a mixture of housing types. We all know that Boston County and Western North Carolina at a broader level are dealing with acute housing crisis. Not just affordable housing, and this rezoning will facilitate the construction and development of housing of all types. In particular, mixed use and attached tenement type development. Next slide. And I'm not going to read through all of these, but this is economic development, education, and jobs. This is the theme that we think this proposed rezoning best advances because of all the things that can happen here. What we want is we won't know what we are going to do until we know what we can do. And what we can't do until the property is obtain the appropriate zone. Next slide. Again, I'm not going to read through all of these. The economic development potential for this rezoning should be obvious. I'll be glad to answer any questions about that. Next slide. Again, and never keep this short. I'm not going to read through all of these, but this rezoning will provide adequate housing options for all income levels. Meet the needs of the economic development. So I would. Next slide. That concludes the presentation. I've tried to be as brief as possible. But we'd be glad to answer the questions. I will say this. You all spent a long time working on this. We think that this rezoning clearly fits within the plan designation of mixed use area 2. And so I would urge you to trust your plan, trust yourselves, trust your orders, and trust your staff. We appreciate your recommendation. We've got to try and
Thank you. That was a very thorough presentation and most appreciated. I have one question. It's just more curiosity than anything else. What is the visibility of from the parkway? How does that make sense?
Clearly, the parkway traverses the property, so it's practically built. So it's like so. There's a lot of the property that is visible from the parkway. I haven't done a shed analysis or anything like that.
A follow-up question to that, the change allows building heights to 90 feet. I think that's what it says. Is that correct? Do you anticipate anything reaching that height down the road?
We don't know. It's we're aware that the change in zoning will allow for an increase in height, but the overlay protects at least I think it's quarter mile on either side of the parkway. It's, there's significant limitations on how high you can go. So it's, at this point, like I said, we won't know what we want to do. Yes, we're very, this will allow for an increase in height. Doesn't mean that every building is going to be 90 feet high. The plan, and to a lesser extent, the ordinance encourages sort of campus-like development.
A quick question, a little maybe off the topic, but this is, I think, the first time the board has seen a proposal come to us in accordance with the new plan. And it's not fair.
Jillian told me it's third.
Oh, well, is it? The first one I'm seeing, and I'm just curious from your perspective, because clearly this isn't your first rodeo and it's your first time here. How did you find it working with the new plan?
By comparison with the old plan, it was, it was very easy to use. I was going through the plan at the time. Strategies and goals. Concur completely with the Margaret Collins, which is the highest award of plans or candidacy. I think this role was a they for a number of years with the other plans. Everybody did a great job. I know I'm mistaken, and you all too.
Okay.
In your plan, you said that you have water, sewer, and gas existing and proposed. How much of that is already existing? What is proposed, and do you have plans for infrastructure for traffic?
Well, the water, sewer, and the other types of water, sewer, gas, and electric are already there. They may not be distributed throughout the entire property, but they're available to the property. As far as the roads go, that's something that you see when we got to the more site-specific plan approval process. No project is going to be approved unless it's got adequate vehicular access. The property is currently served by the bridge across Red Claw River to the Board River. State Parkway, and it will soon be served by the Chief.
You got the new bridge that they just put down there, sandy bottoms.
Yes, sir.
Just a note for the board, the Blue Ridge Parkway overlay, within the overlay itself, the maximum height is 40 feet.
40.
Yes.
Thank you.
And what is the structure in the northern part that's kind of plopped in the middle? What is that structure?
Right.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, that's what that is. All right, just making sure.
That's already zoned.
Right.
Questions?
Doesn't look quite as large in this, even though it's plenty large.
It's a big structure, but it's been long.
There are no further questions, and we thank you very much.
And we'll be back here in case you all do have some more questions.
Very good. And now we'll open up for public comments from the public. And I think the only one we have is Ms. Swartout. Oh, thank you.
My name is Tracy Swartout. I'm the superintendent of Blue Ridge Parkway. I'd like to request 10 minutes, if possible, so that I can provide a bit of background for the purpose and meaning of the adjacent tract, which these subject matters are related, but then also specific comments related to the actual proposal.
No objection.
Objection.
Thank you. So, on first slide, thanks for the opportunity to represent the National Park Service in this hearing that's related to proposed zoning changes for land immediately adjacent to the National Park site. I'm the superintendent of the park, so in sort of regular parlance, that means I'm the CEO of the entire Blue Ridge Parkway. I'm here to share context for consideration regarding the proposed change. This neighboring tract is indeed a section of the Blue Ridge Parkway, and it's a gift of the National Park Service. The same kind of unit is created Smoky Mountains National Park, Yellowstone, Yosemite, and Grand Canyon. And in fact, it's Buncombe County's only national park. The parkway is 469 miles in length, about 88,000 acres. About 20% of the size of Buncombe County itself, and it draws 16 million people per year, more than any other national park in the nation, and more than Grand Canyon, Yellowstone, Yosemite combined. Move forward to the next slide. This is a visual of the parkway to make the Great Smoky Mountains, one end to 10 and over. Next slide. We have the highest visitation of any national park in the entire country. And we also have the highest economic impact of any national park service site in the entire country, greater than the combined economic impact of Grand Canyon, Yellowstone, and Yosemite combined, 1.3 billion rupee per year. Next slide. The parkway is not merely a road or just a road with a right of way. It is the destination for 16 million visitors from around the world traveling through 29 counties, and those are our counties across 2 states. In the next 4 weeks, 2 million people will visit the parkway. Thousands of jobs, direct and indirect, stem from the existence of this national park site continues through our county. Tax revenues derived from tourism expenditures provide significant benefit to the county, its residents, and contributes to job creation in the area. Next slide. In 1930, senators from Virginia, North Carolina, and Tennessee contacted the Public Works Administration to discuss the idea of a parkway, and in the 1933 time period at Shenandoah, President Roosevelt met with leaders, and the idea gained traction, and Congress authorized the construction of the national park site in 1933. Construction was begun in 1935, and now we're approaching our centennial of service. Next slide. The parkway has significant built infrastructure. We have more than 500 buildings, 400 miles of trails, almost a large number of individual tourist destinations within the parkway corridor. Most of our built infrastructure is in fact historic and protected, including the road prison itself, which was nominated to be a part of the National Historic Landmark District, which is the highest degree of protection any built structure can get in the United States. The parkway is also one of the most biodiverse national parks, with thousands of species of trees, hundreds of birds, dozens of mammals, amphibians, fish, and reptiles that has 600 miles of streams, 16 peaks higher than 5,000 feet. It is home to 74 globally rare plant and animal species. We have lodges, restaurants, picnic areas, visitor centers, campgrounds, commercial tours, and nearly every weekend, dozens of brides are coming to weddings at overlooks, just like the French Broad overlook that we're going to talk about in a minute. Next slide. Along the parkway, which is 469 miles without a single traffic light, there are thousands of overlooks and viewpoints and dozens of developed locations for people to stop and visit. Each of these overlooks, believe it or not, has a diagram that looks a little bit like this. They were carefully designed by landscape architects in the 30s who were seeking to harmonize the creation of this brand new National Park Service site, the natural environment, and allow people to forge deep connections with the place and the Southern Appalachians. These parkway land use maps are called plans. They exist in our archives today for the entirety of the National Park Unit, and they represent detailed and explicit plans of where we would put the benches, the vegetation, what kinds of trees and species there would be. They quantify the number of acreage of the open vistas, the woods, the shrub base, and the grass base around them. Even though it looks simple, it's quite complicated, and it's an organized and orderly design experience for 16 million people to encounter. These documents guide our work today. Part of the creation of the road itself, the gentle bend, the view of the vista, was a big part of what they were trying to achieve. But it's these overlooks, in fact, that allow people to go more deep. Each overlook is a vignette of the surrounding communities, inviting people in to spend their money there. Next slide. The Park Service stewards experience of visitors of the nation's most important places. These are some of the character-defining features that you see along the parkway. The Blue Ridge Parkway has 25% of all of the entire maintained landscapes in the entire National Park Service nationwide. Special features like the delicate rock work in the tunnels, the fencing along, and many of our historic structures define what it is that makes this place important for the county, the state, the nation, and the world. Next slide. Crews began construction in the 1930s. When they finished in 1987 at the Lenco Viaduct, they laid this road so lightly on the land to protect the species and the environments that were there. They could have done it another way, but didn't, because they were sweet and experienced to protect the resources forever and to protect the values that allowed us to remain as an economic engine for the country. Next slide. In the Park Service, we say that we're in the forever business. The 1916 Organic Act defines exactly what we do, which is to provide even with an opportunity to connect with resources and to protect these resources, including the vistas, for future generations. Now, many of the challenges that we face on the Parkway today are related to trying to ensure that that experience does indeed stay the same. We face challenges with climate change. We face challenges with intense visitor use, increased erosion from stronger storms, slope failures, vandalism, and lots of other damage that threaten the experience that we're protecting here, and the national investment in the road. Our work is unending. Development pushes in at every turn and every overlook, and landscapes that were once agricultural or pastoral been replaced with neighborhoods boasting easy access to use of the park or easy access to the parkway. Developers approach me personally at least monthly, trying to improve property values along the parkway by adding just one more connection to the parkway. Thankfully, I'm not allowed to do that, and it preserves what we're trying to protect, which is an uninterrupted drive of 469 miles, showcasing the best of what this country has to offer. Together, we all share the responsibility for the parkway and shuttling that experience forever. Park Service, the Green Great folks, we manage what's inside, but we collectively manage what lies beyond, what you can see at the overlooks. In some places, we're surrounded by national forests, state parks, privately held conservation lands. And in those areas, we have a greater framework of protection to provide some kind of buffer for the work. But each county also plays an important role in meeting its own objectives while supporting the protection of a nationally significant tourism asset for the local economy. Today, this body plays a role in determining the future of the neighborhood of this tract. To share this with you so you understand the purpose and place. In the applicant's package, they reference the Blue Ridge Parkway as a road with a right of way. And in the county staff report, you see reference to the parkway serving as a natural transition area from the subject tracts to other uses. I challenge you to grow your understanding of the significance of having a National Park Service unit in your county and to understand what that means for neighboring land uses and the changes that we might allow right along the parkway. There may be impacts that can occur with these changes that are not yet envisioned, especially when plans don't exist until zoning is changed. Certainly, you'll be asked to consider whether or not this proposed change is consistent with the recent comprehensive plan. During recent public engagement for the development of the plan, respondents overwhelmingly spoke in favor of environmental protection. In fact, in the final adopted plan on page 29, it highlights that environmental protection and sustainable development were the two most frequently mentioned themes for the public when they engaged around this plan. While the plan indeed did indicate areas where mixed-use development should be considered, decisions on individual zoning changes within those proposed locations still need to be considered on a case basis, and of course, determine the impact to the neighbors. In this case, the neighbors is your only national park unit. Therefore, I'd ask this body carefully consider any zoning changes on properties adjacent to the nation's most visited National Park Service unit with the highest degree of economic impact of any national park in the entire country when you have a nationally significant tourism driving treasure next to you. That is your neighborhood. The parkway is such an extraordinary example of landscape architecture that has been nominated in its entirety as a National Historic Landmark District. Individual features that are especially called out include our overlooks, and one of those especially called out is the French Broad Overlook. The zoning that exists along the length of the parkway plays an important part in the stewardship of the park site. In this case, unlike any other mixed-use areas, this tract is next to a national park. Considering a national park as a transition area between other zoning seems to miss the importance of the significance of the place. Next slide. Your attention will be brought to the fact that in Buncombe County, there's a special zoning overlay. Yes, it's true that it applies to properties within 1,320 feet, but it doesn't completely eliminate development within that 1,320 feet. The overlay provides, among other measures, a 50-foot setback for construction of primary buildings. In such, you could have buildings 50 feet from the Blue Ridge Parkway. Less than 40 feet, of course. Beyond that, the setback would be 1,000 feet. If you could have 40-foot structures 50 feet from the Blue Ridge Parkway, anywhere you change the zoning. This overlay is important because it would exist in any kind of zoning. However, it may not provide the extent of protection that this body wishes to offer to its only national park site. I'll talk specifically about the subject tract. Next slide. This is the French Broad Overlook. This is a couple of views from the French Broad Overlook. We are looking at the subject tract in the distance. While the overlook is outside of this zoning application, the view from this overlook is a contributing feature of our nomination as a National Historic Landmark District. The view, as demonstrated on this slide, looks directly into the southern half of this mostly undeveloped tract. Development that's allowed within the EMP zoning designation could permanently degrade a nationally significant viewshed and in its wake jeopardize the very National Historic Landmark District nomination that's now in progress. A change of zoning from existing to EMP could allow this view to change forever. It could allow structures and uses of significantly higher density, a reduction in forest cover, a potential for significant external lighting that could impact the nighttime travel that's on the parkway, possibly increase maximum building height to 90 feet. And it could cause significant development to occur within 50 feet of each side of the Blue Ridge Parkway, running the entirety of the space between the Frenchville River and I-26. The application states that the existing overlay would limit development of a quarter of a mile, and I would say that that's not exactly true. It may restrict it somewhat, but it certainly isn't going to prevent it. Next slide. Since its inception, the parkway has retained, oh, and this is another slide where you can see the French spot overlook relative to the subject side. Since its inception, the parkway's retained an exceptionally high degree of integrity design, which has provided for a continuous experience of 469 miles. We have a lot of other overlooks in this county as well, and they're beautiful. The set of uses possible by this change in zoning could convert this beautiful landscape into a densely developed area and compromise the experience of the parkway. Other Buncombe County vistas include Craggy Gardens, Tambark Ridge, and Hawk Creek overlooks. However, the view of Forested Hillside from the Parkway's French Broad overlook is a contributing feature to the NHL nomination. The subject track's existing zoning provides some degree of protection from the Park Service views into this land over 60 million visitors experiences this space, their experience of Buncombe County. Next slide. Impact should be fully evaluated. Next slide. Impact should be fully evaluated for all projects that may impact the Parkway historic character and visitors experience. I would urge you as a member of this body fully understand what it might mean when you permanently change the zoning or place up against the national park site. And not just any location, but a location that's going to be seen from one of your most prominent viewpoints in the county. I'm available for questions.
Thank you. Any questions?
I have a question now. This is probably one of the most challenging decisions a planning board might have to make, especially when you do consider the proximity of the parkway to the subject property. Have y'all had a chance to communicate? Have y'all talked about these kind of issues with the developer, or have you had much interaction as the superintendent with the folks here that want to change the designation?
Thank you. That's a great question. Certainly, when we think about all the pebbles that are in the river of what is resulting in a request for a change in zoning, we have been involved all along the way, from the original initiation of the Army Corps of Engineers when bridges were approved, to engaging with the state on the new exit creation, and all along the way, each individual project's been looked at as one thing and not a cumulative impact. And yet here we are today, looking at the most recent cumulative impact. I fully expect there could be proposals in the future to connect these two tracks together, even though there's not really the ability to do that easily beyond the 14-foot width across the parkway and under it. So this particular team, I have a lot of respect for, and I know them to be good people, but I will say that it wasn't until I made the county aware that I was coming today on Friday, that late that afternoon, that anyone on the team reached out to the National Park Service.
I have a question more possibly for staff. I really appreciated the development team pointing out how this worked with certain aspects of the new plan. But obviously there are some areas in the new plan that were not addressed. And I want to know, how do the staff feel about some of the more conservation oriented chapters in the plan? Because what you omit is sometimes just as important as what you include.
So we have a couple of specific policies in the plan to look at the Blue Ridge Parkway overlay itself and evaluate how we can work with the parkway and evaluate how we can make sure that's working the way we intend it to work. In regards to environmentally sensitive areas, the parkway overlay has always been a place within, what is it, Shannon? Is it 500 feet on each side of the parkway? I can't remember. So we've always had that foundation of protecting the parkway with the overlay. And as part of the process, when we go through text amendments, that'll be one of the things you guys look at, is that parkway overlay and what we need to do to shore up protection within the parkway overlay.
So the parkway isn't just a line, it isn't just a center line. And one of the things that we often think about, especially where we have areas along the parkway that are 5,000 acres, 6,000 acres, 4,000 acres, full of very significant historic features, overlooks, trails, and views, is whether or not a straight line from center line or edge of road is what we often think about. I think people often think of the parkway as a road that sits on others' land with the right of way. It is a national park site with a boundary that is quite large. And in some areas, they're the size of other national parks just in that one developed area. So I think each county needs to make a decision about how any kind of restrictions along the parkway play a role in both meeting the county's imperatives, obviously incredibly important, but also protecting an economic generator that is one of the highest draws of tourism in the state.
So with that in mind, is it, I'm a little maybe naive, but unclear on the timing of things. If we're going to address the overlay and possibly within Buncombe County, what those boundaries actually should look like, are we premature in doing and making any kind of decision about this? I would hate for us to be looking at something, well, it's grandfathered in or something like that.
So you would have to have a discussion with the applicant when they are planning to move forward with this development. But the EMP zoning, like the EMP zoning request, fits within the context of the future land use plan. Staff has recommended approval of it. And any sort of large scale development, if you remember the Pratt and Whitney site, that had to go through Board of Adjustment approval. So any sort of large scale development of that site would have to go through Board of Adjustment approval. But you were just looking at the zoning and all the uses allowed in that zoning district. And the Blue Ridge Parkway overlay would stand within that area.
So this French Broad overlay, the area that we're looking at, would it definitely be affected by the development?
What I heard the applicant say was that there were no plans until the zoning was changed. So I think anything that's available within the EMP district be considered.
I mean, we do not have conditional zoning yet. They are not required to submit a site plan. You are just looking at changing the zoning at this point. So we don't know what they're proposing. You are looking at the allowed uses in the EMP zoning district versus the allowed uses in all the other zoning district, which part of it is already zoned commercial. And you are making the decision based on that.
Well, and that I think would be my question. So considering what the zoning is now, if we change it to EMP, how much does that impact in terms I can understand? What exactly will be possible to be visible? I mean, we don't know what anybody's going to put there. They probably don't know what they're going to put there at this point, but I would be concerned about what happens with the parkway because one, it is what it is. For as long as I've been sitting on this board, we have heard concerns about losing the beauty of the parkway to all the development that's going on. And I think that concern was reflected in what people said they wanted to see in the 2043 plan. So it is a hard decision. I mean, we certainly understand the need for progress in terms of what the Biltmore Farms people are trying to do. But what do we lose in the process, or do we have to lose something in the process?
So currently, part of that property is the Pratt and Whitney site's zoned EMP. Part of that property is zoned CS. Part of that property is zoned R3. So for example, R3, you could do apartment complex with a PUD approval. CS, you could do a large scale commercial use. And EMP allows more sort of industrial uses and warehouse uses. So just a slightly wider use of uses than R3 and CS. And then you have that, don't forget about that RLD that they're keeping down at the bottom. And then R3 and CS, CS maximum height is 50 feet. R3 maximum height is 35 feet.
Okay.
Did I answer your question, Nancy?
Sort of. I mean, I mean, to the best of your ability, yes. It's my ability to understand what we're talking about. That's in terms of what it's actually going to look like and what it can actually do that I have questions about. But thank
Kind
you.
of- Kind of a follow-up question for the superintendent on that. Since we don't have a specific proposal that we're looking at, we're just looking at a zoning redesignation. What aspects of the EMP designation concern the parkway? What would you feel would be the greatest threat to the parkway from a redesignation?
Thank you. Certainly the height is one concern, but also this allows for mining operations. EMP, if I'm not mistaken, allows for mining operations. The full range of EMP opportunities to me would be on the table until someone showed me that there's a different plan. And so when I'm thinking about the range of what we say is okay to go in next to the national park, my comments are based on that whole range of things, not having a plan.
And to that point, that's a good point you brought up. I am not familiar with what the parkway would consider acceptable as a neighbor or you would be comfortable with. Could you elaborate more on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all zoning types could be compatible with parkway. And I think there are some things that can be put in place to prepare for that. We don't have conditional zoning as we stated by staff, so we're hamstrung that way with regard to something like this. Generally speaking, on the Park Service side, we're seeking to protect those things that you can see from the parkway. There are many counties along our lanes where when they're proposing something like a greenhouse that might have significant exterior lighting, they will send those proposals to us for review, and we might make recommendations on things like down lighting and other things, because we're all working together to try to preserve the experience of those drivers on the parkway. And some of those things are linear distance from the center line, and some of them are not. So there can be all kinds of zoning types that provide good neighbors, but lighter developed certainly are going to have less impact. Certain kinds of development, and in particular, the applicant itself, the applicant themselves in the application state that it's likely that would be increased use of space, right? Increased transportation, increased congestion. This is a fairly small area, and it's already one of our most utilized entrances on the Blue Parkway nearby. And so I would anticipate increases to traffic and congestion along the parkway. I would anticipate some kind of negative impact on the viewshed from this property. So I think when we're seeking to find a place in the future, when we're looking at the Woodward Parkway overlook, one of the things we may want to consider is whether it's just straight line and whether or not something more expansive around the viewsheds. In particular, there's a finite number of important views along the park that are within each county. And it will be up to the county to make a decision on how to best protect those. And I think there's lots of things you can do across a whole bunch of different zoning types. The existing zoning has provided the kind of protection that you see now, and that has allowed for that overlook to become one of the important features on the National Historic Landmark designation. If that view is changed, it will likely lose its relevance as a contributing feature.
And to that point, this R3 green section that we're looking at, that seems to also be the same section you have marked out on one of your slides. Is that the view feature that you're addressing?
That's correct. That's one of them. Certainly views all along the parkway would matter. And you can see how changing to EMP along the length would change potentially the view between the French Broad River and I-26. But in particular, the French Broad overlook, that present R3 is a section that you're looking upon, that green hill from the French Broad overlook.
Okay.
So just to note, mining and extraction operations are a special use permit within EMP. They're not allowed as a use by right.
So that,
Would it be your preference for that view field to remain R3?
I would prefer the existing zoning to stay than for it to change, which is fine.
Okay.
Can I address a question to the development team as well?
Thank you.
So, we may ask you to come back, Superintendent. First off, I was excited to see phrases like workforce housing and density and the idea of having 15-minute areas where you can walk to lots of things is very appealing. So there's a lot to like in what you proposed. I am concerned a little bit that, as the superintendent indicated, if I understood you correctly, there was no outreach to you until you found out that she was going to be here.
So just to note for the planning board, per the ordinance, we inform the Parkway of rezoning requests. So that's how they found out about the rezoning request, is staff sent them staff report and made them aware of the rezoning request.
When did they receive that report?
Do you remember when?
2 weeks ago?
Yeah, it was about 2 weeks ago. We got the card in the mail, like any resident
Okay.
would.
We also emailed the planner for the Parkway, Dawn.
Okay.
I don't remember Dawn's
so-
last name.
Your answer to this question is going to have no teeth. It doesn't commit you to anything. I'm just curious. Would you do that differently going forward? As you move into the project, can you tell the board that you will be actively engaging, assuming that the zoning is done? I don't know if that's normal, but it just seems like communication and collaboration is a better way to go than to silo ourselves.
Looked at Mr. Teague, who said that we're happy to engage. I think that type of engagement is more appropriate on project by project basis. We're talking about. Right. Here. The slide showed said 700 something acres. It's really just, it's 400 something acres. And within essentially two pieces, two tracts of land, one on the north side of the park and one on the south side. And there are, as still pointed out, for any project of any size, there's a fairly rigorous process to go through, either stimulating development or special project for land unit development. And perhaps in the future would be conditional zoning. So we think this is the appropriate times to engage in what these projects look like. We can already build within this usage term, and there's a lot of commercials on the property, neighborhood business, and residential free that allow for some pretty solid structures. Multi-families, when it comes to kind of things that the park is concerned about, multi-family is not really any less intrusive than so, but I would want to point out that it's in the mixed use area. There are some things that we currently can't do that your plan says you can't use area altogether. And that you can't do it in the R3 area. Those include land use development level 2, which are non-residential HUDs, banks and other financial institutions, healthcare facilities, manufacturing, processing operations, mostly involved in professional and business offices and services. But those are things we currently cannot have in the R3 that we think would be appropriate any kind of campus-like development style that and also retail trade, commercial services, that kind of thing. That cannot occur in the R3 area. But it's not as if the R3 area cannot be developed. So what we're seeking to do is to get to obtain rezoning. Criminal property, which your plan says, there are processes, and they're likely to be more. But the first step is getting zoning.
Thank you.
We understand that. But I guess the bigger question, Bob, is this is right in the heart of everything. That's a centerpiece of Asheville, a centerpiece of Buncombe County. You have to acknowledge the Parkway is going dead through the center of both of those properties. And the Parkway is a long-time resident of Buncombe County. What is your plan, your developer's plan for working with the Parkway to ensure that we allow you guys to do what you need going forward and not interfere with the parkway. This is one of those projects where it seems like you should be able to do both if there's sufficient communication, but it just feels fraught with peril from this point of the table. For the lack of communication and coordination. That's a viewpoint. I've been there multiple times on the parkway.
And that was all.
Yes. And so I would just like to see more engagement here.
Mr. T, can I have?
Sure.
I may have a, sure. We're happy to engage with the Parkway as we always have been. We're happy to visit with them and to comply with the overlay that's in place today. That's more restrictive, limiting heights and things. I don't think that's been recognized significantly. If you look at the CS, it's 50 foot. Within that overlay, it's 40 foot. So it's a fairly restrictive overlay. And the view sheds are certainly important to the parkway as a whole, but beyond our property. So within the 500 miles or approximately of the Blue Ridge Parkway, this is 1 mile of that. So we're happy to have a conversation, happy to engage, and to see our way forward.
Obviously, as Mr. Oates said, that you already have zoning to build there. So with this proposal to rezone, you obviously have some type of plan in place that you want to put some type of structures there. Or else you would just build on the current zoning. I mean, you just wouldn't propose to rezone it without some type of idea of what you want to go there.
Our idea of what we'd like to occur there is the same idea the county had, reflected in the comprehensive plan. There are no specific plans, and we can't make any promises here. And what we want to as to specific type of use. It's what we're seeking to do is to be rezoned, be consistent with the county's newly adopted comprehensive plan, just to facilitate the kinds of things that your plan indicates the county wants to happen. But we can't know what we will do, but we know what we can do.
Well, the plan also calls for conservation.
Mm-hmm.
And we have, and in that vein, we specifically exempted the low density tract along the river. We do not have to get overlay, cut back, or anything like that. There are processes, but any plan of any size, not this board of adjustment or a special use permit to establish community or development. That is where we invest things like conservation and preservation. And that's the appropriate thing.
And there's going to be development. I mean, because they own the property and it's already zoned where there can be development. It's just a matter of what kind of development gets there at this point and what the difference is in what's already allowed versus what the new zoning would allow. And to the point of the Blue Ridge overlay, how much of this property that we're looking at is involved in the Blue Ridge overlay? Is it all of it or?
Not all of it. It's a buffer on either side of, if you look at your maps, you see where the Blue Ridge Parkway runs, you can see it. It's sort of that cutout. It's a buffer on either side of that, sort of like our protected ridge overlay. Do you have it pulled up?
Which one?
Blue Ridge Parkway.
In terms of the
What, yeah, like what's the buffer? I can't remember.
That one.
Yeah, put it on the screen.
Got the
Shannon's gonna put it
overlay.
on the screen for you so you can see.
And just for clarity purposes, and maybe the superintendent can address this one technical question. This buffer that we're talking about right now, is that the one delineated by the brown markers that you see at the edge of way? Little
No,
small
no.
brown markers that say
So,
National Park.
The mark. So it's 1,320 feet off the center line of the Blue Ridge Parkway. And you can see it up there. If you look at the screen, the purple is the parkway overlay.
So to answer your question, the little signs that you see on the edge of the parkway are mile markers, historic mile markers, and we have one for each of the 469 miles.
But no, that's not my question. My question is, as you walk away from the parkway and you go 50 yards into the woods, you'll come upon a brown flexible plastic marker. What is that marker?
So it depends on where you are and what it is. So our boundary, in some places is quite narrow. So maybe there is a location on the parkway where you go 50 yards and that's the end of the government owned property. But there may be a place where it's more than a mile wide, right, where the parkway is. So it may very well be a government boundary sign, but we don't have marked the overlay district. And that purple that I understand is the overlay district. That is the area where any properties that fall within that are subject to the overlay.
Correct.
Correct.
So the purple up there is any, like if you're developing something within the purple, you're subject to the overlay requirement standards, including the limitation on height. And we
What
have
is that limitation on height?
40 feet or 50 feet? Sorry.
The height?
My understanding is 50 feet from the boundary, it's 40 feet in height, correct? You have to go 50 feet back and then it's 40 feet. And then once you get-
feet. from
So
the
it's a 50-foot setback and then the height is 40 feet.
So you may be able to-
Within 1,000 feet.
And how wide is that purple section that we're looking at on this map?
1,300
1,300
square feet from the center line.
from the center.
Can you measure, Shannon, and tell them?
But I
And
think
it looks like they put Pratt Whitney,
Right on.
Right up.
yeah,
to the edge.
right
Right on the edge.
outside the edge of that.
Like the whole width, not just half the width.
Were you consulted on Pratt and Whitney
So
for the
it's,
superintendent?
Yeah, I'm gonna ask Dawn, the planner. We were. Yeah.
You were?
so it's about 3,500 feet, the whole width of the overlay.
Do I understand this, the staff is recommending approval of the zoning change?
Yes.
I don't have any questions. I do have a comment, if I may. This is a hard one because it seems to put a couple of the planning things sort of at odds with each other, but it's going to be developed somehow. And I think we can't have the plan and then decide we don't like the plan when it comes up against something hard like this. I would rather see it developed in a mixed use way where there's a 15-minute, I'm using that as shorthand for something that is kind of a multimodal use.
15-minute cities.
A 15-minute city kind of idea, things you can walk, small pocket neighborhoods, call it what you want. I'd rather see it developed that way because ultimately that is the model that's going to conserve more open land for the county as we go forward. And that feels a little bit like so if we approve this, we're kicking the can down the road, but I don't think it's our authority to make the decision. That's something that's going to happen as you get into planning. I would only hope and pray that you live up to what you just said here and that you do engage closely with the Parkway on anything going forward.
I would kind of go along with that. I mean, I certainly want to see the mixed use piece happen, but my concern would also be for the Parkway because I think Superintendent Swartout made some very cogent points about what could happen that are unintended consequences. And it would, I think, and not that this can happen at this moment, but in my mind, it would be a much easier decision if we knew that the planning with the Parkway had already been happening or underway and that was definitely being considered in whatever comes next.
But
But
we postpone the vote until they have time. We ask them to collaborate.
I have to agree with
Yeah,
that
I was
too.
wondering about that too.
This would be in a much different hearing if both parties had come in, had talked, had worked, had agreed to certain things, and they were kind of jointly presenting this as something both parties could live with. And that's why I asked my question about communication. How much time, how much communication has occurred? We can do a lot of damage really quick by making a really fast decision.
Right.
And this is the heart of Buncombe County. This is the heart of one of the most beautiful sites in the world. I've traveled every bit of the Blue Ridge Parkway all the way into Virginia. And I know how important it is to this community, and so is the developments that you're having in mind as well. I agree with what Mr. Ken has said here about what would be an appropriate development for properties. And I think most of us see that as well, because we've sat on this board for a length of time. But this one is super sensitive. This one is, you're talking about the national treasure here. And it would be a different hearing if you guys had communicated greatly and we saw a more joint presentation to us. I would, for one, prefer to see this continued, to allow you guys to talk and to see what kinds of things can be done to preserve both the parkway and your right to develop your property and do it in a more planned way. So yeah, I would like to postpone.
I think it's a good idea. I concur with Eric and
I would be in favor of that as well. I don't, do we need a motion for that, or how does this work? We need to make a motion?
They need to continue it to a date certain.
Yeah,
Right.
I would continue it to a date certain, so we don't have to re-advertise.
So your next date is November 20th.
And does that give everybody enough time?
Folks on the back row right there, will that work, Bill?
Then, we want to make the motion to continue this, to our next, planning board meeting, which is November the 20th.
So moved. A second.
All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? And we're unanimous.